The sun blazed like molten copper in the merciless sky, casting long shadows across the parched earth of Samuel Mackenzie's ranch. For 3 days, temperatures had climbed past anything decent folk should endure, and even the desert lizards had abandoned their hunt for shade. Sam wiped sweat from his weathered brow as he walked to the well, the wooden bucket creaking against the rope with each step. At 52, Sam had learned that frontier survival depended on 3 things: water, vigilance, and knowing when compassion might get you killed. His ranch sat in disputed territory where Apache raids were as common as thunderstorms, and where a white man's scalp could buy a warrior enough trade goods to last a winter. Most settlers had abandoned this stretch of land years ago, but Sam Mackenzie was as stubborn as the mesquite trees that refused to die in the drought. The well stood 30 yards from his modest adobe house, positioned where the underground spring ran strongest. As he approached, something caught his eye, a dark shape crumpled near the wooden frame. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the Colt 45 on his hip, his body tensing with practiced alertness. What he found made him pause. A young Apache warrior, perhaps 25 years old, lay unconscious beside the well. Blood had dried in dark stains across his chest and left shoulder, and his breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. The man's horse was nowhere to be seen, and from the tracks in the dust, it appeared he'd crawled the final distance to the water source. Sam studied the warrior's face, noting the high cheekbones and traditional markings that identified him as Apache. This was enemy territory for both of them. Sam knew that Apache justice was swift and merciless, just as white settlers showed little mercy to raiding parties. The smart thing would be to mount his horse and ride to Fort Braxton, 20 miles south, and let the cavalry deal with the situation. But something held him back. Perhaps it was the memory of his own son, Michael, who died of fever 3 years ago at nearly the same age. Perhaps it was simple human recognition of suffering. Or perhaps it was knowing that this young man had crawled here, seeking the same thing Sam himself needed: water to sustain life in an unforgiving land. Sam knelt beside the warrior, checking for weapons. He found a knife and a small tomahawk, both of which he carefully set aside. The man's wounds appeared to be from rifle shots, likely from a skirmish with cavalry. One bullet had torn through his shoulder, while another had grazed his ribs. Serious, but not fatal if treated properly. "Lord help me," Sam muttered, making a decision that went against every survival instinct he'd developed. He drew water from the well and gently lifted the warrior's head, dripping cool liquid between his lips. The Apache's eyes fluttered open, dark, intelligent eyes that fixed on Sam's face with a mixture of confusion and wariness. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across the divide of culture, language, and conflict. Sam saw no hatred in those eyes, only pain and the fundamental human need for survival. The warrior tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper in his native tongue. "Easy there," Sam said softly, continuing to give him water. "You're hurt bad, but you're alive." The warrior's hand moved weakly toward his weapons, but Sam had already removed them. Understanding passed between them. The Apache was completely at the rancher's mercy. Yet instead of fear, Sam saw something like resignation, perhaps even gratitude. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Sam made another decision that would have seemed impossible hours before. He couldn't leave a wounded man to die in the desert, regardless of conflicts between their peoples. Using a blanket from his house, he fashioned a makeshift stretcher and slowly dragged the Apache inside. The rancher's home was simple but comfortable. 2 rooms with thick adobe walls that provided blessed relief from the heat. He placed the warrior on his own bed and began the careful work of cleaning and dressing the wounds. The Apache drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling words Sam couldn't understand. As night fell, Sam prepared beans and cornbread, managing to get some broth into the wounded man. The warrior's fever had broken, and his breathing steadied. Sam found himself studying the intricate beadwork on the man's shirt and the careful craftsmanship of his leather leggings. These weren't the belongings of a savage, as army propaganda claimed, but of a skilled craftsman with his own culture. "What's your name?" Sam asked quietly, not expecting an answer, but feeling the need to break the silence. To his surprise, the warrior's eyes opened and focused on him. In heavily accented but clear English, he replied, "Ayana. It means eternal blossom." Sam nodded, impressed. "I'm Samuel Mackenzie. Most folks call me Sam." Ayana struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why help enemy?" Sam considered his words carefully. Because you're not my enemy right now. Right now, you're just a hurt man who needed water." The Apache studied his face intently, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You know what happened when my people find me here?" Sam felt a chill despite the warm night air. He'd been so focused on the immediate act of mercy that he hadn't fully considered the consequences. If other Apaches came looking for this warrior, they would find him in a white man's house, wounded and vulnerable. They might assume Sam had been the one to shoot him. "I reckon we'll face that problem when it comes," Sam replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Ayana closed his eyes, but not before Sam caught a flicker of what might have been respect. "You are a brave man, Samuel Mackenzie, or very foolish?" "Probably both," Sam admitted with a wry smile. As night deepened, Sam kept watch while the Apache slept fitfully. Through the window, he could see the vast desert stretching endlessly under brilliant stars. Somewhere out there, others might already be searching for the missing warrior. Somewhere out there, the consequences of his compassion were already set in motion. But for now, in the quiet sanctuary of his home, two men from different worlds shared the simple human experience of survival. It was fragile peace, Sam knew, as delicate as morning dew in the desert. Yet it was also something precious, a moment when divisions between peoples seemed less important than the universal need for water, shelter, and mercy. As dawn approached, Sam dozed fitfully in his chair, rifle across his knees. When he woke to the first grey light of morning, he found Ayana already awake, staring out the window with deep concern. "They come," the warrior said quietly. "My people, they come." The first sign was a dust cloud on the eastern horizon, barely visible in the pale dawn light. Sam squinted through his spyglass, his stomach tightening as he counted the riders. 50, perhaps 60 mounted warriors, moving in perfect formation. But as minutes passed and more dust clouds appeared from different directions, he realized the true scope of what was approaching. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, lowering the spyglass with trembling hands. From the north came another group. From the west, a third band. By the time the sun had fully risen, Sam counted 7 distinct groups of Apache warriors converging on his ranch like spokes of a great wheel. Ayana had managed to stand and join him at the window, leaning heavily against the wall. His face was grim as he identified the approaching forces. Chiricahua from the east, Mescalero from the north, my own people, the White Mountain Apache, from the west. He continued naming the tribes: Lipan, Jicarilla, Tonto, and Western Apache. 7 tribes, Sam said quietly. "I've never heard of so many working together." "Neither have I," Ayana replied, fear in his voice. "This is unprecedented." As the warriors drew closer, Sam could make out faces painted for war. Eagle feathers adorned their hair, and weapons gleamed in the morning sun. The horses were magnificent pintos and mustangs that moved with fluid grace. It was both beautiful and terrifying. "What are you to them?" Sam asked, beginning to understand he'd stumbled into something far more significant. Ayana was quiet for a moment. "I am grandson of Cochise, son of Naiche. My blood carries the hopes of peace between our peoples." Sam felt his knees go weak. If this young man was Cochise's grandson, then Sam had placed himself at the center of what could become a war involving multiple tribes. "They think I'm holding you prisoner," Sam said. "Perhaps, or they think you killed me for bounty." Ayana winced as he shifted position. Either way, they will not leave without answers. The warriors had formed a complete circle around the ranch, maintaining distance of 200 yards. Sam counted close to 300 mounted fighters. They sat motionless, a ring of death waiting for some signal. From the eastern group, a single rider approached, an older man with silver streaking his long black hair, riding a magnificent black stallion. He carried himself with unmistakable authority. "That is Geronimo," Ayana said quietly. "He leads the Chiricahua now." Sam had heard the name whispered throughout the territory. Geronimo was said to be unconquerable in battle, appearing and disappearing like smoke. To have him at one's doorstep was like facing a force of nature. "Will he listen to reason?" Sam asked. "Geronimo listens only to strength," Ayana replied, "but he is wise. If he believes I am here by choice, unharmed, he may talk. And if he doesn't, then you will die very slowly, and your death will be remembered as a warning." Geronimo halted 50 yards from the house. His voice carried clearly as he called out in Apache, a demand for answers, backed by overwhelming force. "He wants to see me alive and unharmed," Ayana translated. He gives you one chance to prove you have not harmed me. Sam looked at the young warrior, realizing his life depended entirely on this man's truthfulness. Will you tell them what really happened? I will tell them that Samuel Mackenzie gave water to a dying Apache when he could have left him to die, but I cannot tell them how they should respond to such kindness. Sam nodded, setting his rifle aside. If shooting started, one rifle would be useless against 300 warriors. His only hope lay in truth. Help me walk to the door, Ayana said. Let them see that I live and that I choose to trust you. Supporting the wounded warrior, Sam opened his door and stepped into the blazing sun. The sight was overwhelming. Hundreds of painted warriors in battle regalia, their horses prancing restlessly. Every weapon was ready, every eye focused on the small adobe house. Geronimo spurred his horse forward until Sam could see the intelligence burning in his dark eyes. The war chief radiated intensity that made Sam feel like he was facing a caged wolf. The Apache leader spoke rapidly to Ayana, his voice demanding. Ayana responded at length, gesturing toward Sam. The conversation continued for several minutes, with other warriors occasionally calling out. Sam stood silent, knowing his life hung in the balance of words he couldn't understand. Sweat ran down his face as he waited for a verdict. Finally, Geronimo's gaze fixed on Sam. In heavily accented English, he said, Apache boy says you give water, says you heal wounds, says you take no scalp when you could. This is truth. It's the truth, Sam replied steadily. I found him dying by my well. I couldn't leave any man to die like that. White men leave Apache to die many times. Why different? Sam thought carefully. Because dying of thirst in the desert isn't how any warrior should end his days. Apache or white man, we all need water to live. Geronimo studied him, then spoke again to Ayana. The young man replied emphatically, pointing to his bandaged wounds and then to Sam. There was respect and gratitude in his voice. Grandson of Cochise says you are man of honor, Geronimo announced. Says you risk much to help enemy. This is not normal thing. No, Sam agreed. It's not normal. But maybe that's what's wrong with this land. Maybe we need to do things that aren't normal. A murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Geronimo showed no emotion, but Sam sensed the war chief was weighing far more than just the immediate situation. You know who this boy is? Geronimo asked. You know what his blood means to Apache people? I do now, Sam replied. But when I found him, he was just a hurt young man who needed help. That's all that mattered. Geronimo nodded slowly. Apache remember kindness. Apache also remember insult. You do great kindness to son of Naiche, but other white men do great insults to Apache people. Which should we remember more? Geronimo's question hung in the desert air like the tension before a thunderstorm. Which should we remember more? The war chief's eyes never left Sam's face, waiting for an answer that could determine not just his fate, but potentially the relationship between their peoples for generations. Sam felt the weight of 300 warriors watching him, their weapons ready, their horses restless in the growing heat. Behind him, Ayana stood silent but supportive, his presence a reminder of the trust that had brought them to this moment. I can't answer for other white men, Sam said finally, his voice carrying clearly across the circle. I can only answer for myself. And I believe that kindness should always be remembered longer than insults. Kindness is what builds the future. Insults only repeat the past. A murmur ran through the assembled tribes. Some warriors seemed impressed by his boldness, while others appeared skeptical. From the northern group, a young Mescalero chief spurred his horse forward, his face painted with black stripes that marked him as a proven warrior. The young chief spoke rapidly in Apache, his tone clearly challenging. Ayana translated quietly. He says this is a trick. Says white men use kindness as a weapon, make Apache weak with gifts and promises, then strike when guard is down. He says you heal my wounds only to deliver me to army for bounty. The accusation rippled through the warriors. Several voiced agreement, their horses dancing as their riders' agitation transferred to them. Sam felt the delicate balance beginning to slip away. What is your answer, Samuel Mackenzie? Geronimo asked, using his full name with careful pronunciation. How does one white man prove he is different from all others? Sam looked around the circle of warriors, then back at Ayana. An idea began to form. Dangerous, perhaps foolish, but potentially the only way to demonstrate his sincerity. I'll prove it, Sam said, his voice steady. I'll prove that I meant no harm to this young man, and that my kindness came from the heart, not from calculation. He walked slowly back into his house, aware that every weapon was now trained on him. From his bedroom he retrieved Ayana's knife and tomahawk, the weapons he'd set aside when he first found the wounded warrior. Returning to the doorway, he held them high for all to see. "These are your grandson's weapons," he called out to Geronimo. "I took them when I found him, as any careful man would, but I return them now, freely, with no conditions." Walking forward with deliberate steps, Sam placed the weapons at Ayana's feet. Then, in a gesture that made several warriors gasp, he knelt on one knee before the young Apache and bowed his head. "I place myself under your protection, Ayana, grandson of Cochise," Sam said formally. "If I have wronged you in any way, I submit to your judgment. If I have shown you kindness, I ask only that you speak the truth of it." The circle erupted in voices as warriors debated this unprecedented action. Never had they seen a white man voluntarily place himself at the mercy of an Apache, especially not in such a public manner. Even Geronimo seemed taken aback. Ayana looked down at the kneeling rancher for a long moment, then slowly picked up his weapons. With difficulty due to his wounds, he managed to strap them back into place. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of his bloodline. "Hear me, warriors of the 7 tribes," he called out in Apache, then repeated in English. "This man found me dying at his well. He could have taken my hair for bounty. He could have left me to die and told no one. Instead, he gave me water when I thirsted. He gave me shelter when I had none. He tended my wounds with his own hands and shared his food." He paused, letting his words sink in. "More than this, when I told him my people would come seeking me, he did not try to hide what he had done. He did not flee to the fort for protection. He stayed, knowing the risk because he believed that truth and kindness would speak louder than fear and hatred." Ayana reached down and placed his hand on Sam's shoulder. "Rise, Samuel Mackenzie. You have shown honor to the grandson of Cochise. In the name of my grandfather's memory, I name you brother to the Apache people." Sam rose slowly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just occurred, but he could see from the faces around him that not all the warriors accepted this declaration. The young Mescalero chief rode forward again, his voice angry as he challenged Ayana's words. Geronimo raised his hand for silence, and gradually the voices stilled. When he spoke, it was with absolute authority. "Young Chief Victorio speaks wisdom," he said, nodding toward the Mescalero warrior. "Apache have been fooled by white man's kindness before. Treaties signed with smiles were broken with bullets." Sam's heart sank, but Geronimo continued. "But Ayana also speaks wisdom. This white man had nothing to gain from his kindness and much to lose. He could have taken easy bounty. He could have run to safety. Instead, he chose to act with honor when no one was watching." The war chief walked slowly around Sam, studying him like a hunter evaluating prey. Apache way is to test truth with action, not just words. If Samuel Mackenzie truly means no harm to Apache people, if his kindness is real and not trick, then he will accept Apache test. "What test?" Sam asked, though he suspected he might not like the answer. Geronimo smiled, but it was not reassuring. "You say you give water to dying Apache. You say you heal wounds of enemy. You say you believe kindness builds future." He gestured toward the circle of warriors. "Then prove it. Stay here in this land that both our peoples claim. Live as neighbor to Apache tribes. When Apache are wounded, heal them. When Apache thirst, give them water. When Apache hunger, share your food." The implications began to dawn on Sam. "You want me to serve as a bridge between our peoples? I want you to prove that white man can keep word given to Apache," Geronimo replied. "Live 1 year in peace with Apache neighbors. Harm none of our people. Help those who need help as you helped Ayana. Do this and Apache will remember Samuel Mackenzie as man of honor. And if I fail, then Apache will remember Samuel Mackenzie as liar who died badly." Sam looked around the circle of warriors, then at Ayana, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. It was terrifying to remain alone in disputed territory, surrounded by 7 Apache tribes, with only his actions to protect him from death. But it was also an opportunity unlike any that had ever been offered, to live in peace with the Apache, to prove that cooperation was possible, to perhaps help end the cycle of violence that had claimed so many lives. "And if I succeed," Sam asked, If I live this year in peace and help those who need help? Then, Geronimo said slowly, perhaps Apache will consider that not all white men are enemies. Perhaps Apache will talk of peace instead of only war. Perhaps the children of both our peoples will see better days. Sam took a deep breath, aware that his next words would determine not just his own fate, but potentially the future of relations between Apaches and whites in the entire territory. I accept your test, he said firmly. I'll stay. I'll help any who need help, Apache or white, and I'll prove that kindness can be stronger than hatred. A murmur of surprise ran through the assembled warriors. Geronimo nodded approvingly. It is agreed, the war chief announced. Samuel Mackenzie will live 1 year under Apache watch. He will be protected as long as he keeps his word, but he will also be judged by Apache law if he breaks his promise. Ayanna stepped forward, still weak but determined. And I will stay also to heal from my wounds and to watch over my Apache brother. If any harm comes to Samuel Mackenzie through treachery rather than his own actions, they will answer to the grandson of Cochise. As the sun climbed higher in the desert sky, the most unusual agreement in frontier history was sealed not with papers or signatures, but with the ancient Apache ritual of shared water from Sam's well. One by one, representatives from each of the 7 tribes dismounted and drank, acknowledging the sacred nature of the compact they had witnessed. The test had begun. After giving water to a wounded Apache, Chapter 4, Seeds of Peace. 6 months had passed since the test began, and Sam's ranch had transformed into something unprecedented in frontier history, a neutral ground where Apache and white settlers could meet without automatic hostility. The changes had started slowly. First came a Chiricahua woman with her fevered child, remembering stories of how Sam had healed Ayanna's wounds. Sam did what he could with his limited medical knowledge, giving the child water mixed with willow bark and keeping them cool through the worst of the fever. When the child recovered, word spread among the tribes that the white rancher's medicine was strong. Next came an elderly Mescalero warrior with an infected wound from a cavalry skirmish. Though the man spoke no English and regarded Sam with deep suspicion, Ayanna translated as Sam cleaned and dressed the injury. The warrior left without thanks, but returned a week later with a perfectly crafted Apache bow as payment, a gesture of respect that spoke louder than words. By the 6th month, Sam's well had become a regular stop for Apache travelers. They came alone or in small groups, always wary, but increasingly willing to accept the water and basic medical care he offered. In return, they brought news from across the territory and occasional gifts. Intricately beaded moccasins, perfectly balanced throwing knives, pouches of medicinal herbs. Ayanna had proven invaluable as a bridge between worlds. His wounds had healed completely, but he chose to remain at the ranch, serving as translator and cultural guide. Through him, Sam learned Apache protocols, social structures, and the deep spiritual beliefs that governed their relationship with the land. Trouble comes, Ayanna announced one evening as they sat watching the sunset. Colonel Morrison from Fort Braxton rides here with a full patrol. They arrive tomorrow. Sam nodded, sipping coffee from a tin cup that had been a gift from a Tonto Apache elder. He'd been expecting this confrontation for months. The next morning brought 8 mounted soldiers led by a stern-faced colonel. They rode up to the ranch in perfect formation, weapons conspicuously ready. Sam walked out to meet them, aware that Ayanna was watching from the doorway. Colonel Morrison, Fort Braxton, the officer announced crisply. Mr. Mackenzie, I need to discuss your activities in this region. Activities? Sam asked mildly. Collaboration with hostiles, sir. Providing aid and comfort to the enemy. There are serious charges being considered. Before Sam could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. A group of Apache warriors was riding toward the ranch, not in attack formation, but with the relaxed posture of regular visitors. The cavalry patrol immediately went on alert, carbines coming up. The Apaches slowed but continued forward, their own weapons remaining sheathed. Stand down your men, Colonel, Sam said quietly. These are friends. Friends? Morrison's voice was incredulous. Those are Apache warriors, Mr. Mackenzie. Into this tense situation rode Geronimo himself, appearing as if from thin air. The war chief approached alone, his black stallion moving with unhurried confidence. Colonel Morrison of Fort Braxton, Geronimo called out in English, using the officer's name and rank with casual precision. You are guest on Apache land. Samuel Mackenzie is under protection of 7 tribes. Morrison's face went pale. We're here on official United States Army business. This land is under U.S. jurisdiction. Geronimo's smile was not reassuring. This land belongs to those who can hold it. You have 8 soldiers. I have 300 warriors within 1 hour's ride. Sam stepped between the two groups before confrontation could escalate. There's no need for threats from anyone. Colonel, these Apache are here for the same reason your patrol came, to check on the situation. Check on what situation? Morrison demanded. Geronimo dismounted and walked forward until he stood beside Sam. Samuel Mackenzie saves life of Ayana, grandson of Cochise. In return, Apache offers test. Live in peace. Help those who need help. Prove that white man can keep word. For 6 months, he keeps this word. The war chief gestured toward the other Apache warriors. These men come here when wounded, when sick, when needing water. Samuel Mackenzie helps all, asks nothing in return. In 6 months, no Apache raids in this region. No settlers killed, no cattle stolen, no houses burned. Morrison looked confused, as if voluntary peace with Apaches was beyond his training. You're saying you've made some kind of treaty? Not treaty, Geronimo corrected. Treaties are broken by white men like promises to children. This is agreement between warriors. Samuel Mackenzie proves white men can live in honor. Apache proves we can choose peace when peace is offered with respect. Colonel, Sam added, what we've built here could change everything. If this model could be expanded, if other ranchers and other Apache leaders were willing to participate. Morrison studied the unprecedented sight before him. Apache warriors watering their horses at the same well as cavalry mounts, enemies standing together in peaceful conversation. It went against everything in his military experience. I'll be honest, Morrison said finally. This challenges everything I've been taught, but I can't argue with results. This region has been more peaceful in the past 6 months than in the previous 6 years. He looked directly at Geronimo. What happens now? Do you expect the government to officially recognize this arrangement? We expect nothing from government, Geronimo replied. Government speaks with forked tongue, makes promises it does not keep. This arrangement stands on honor of individuals, not words of politicians. But if it works here, Sam said, it could work elsewhere. Other ranchers could follow this example. Other Apache leaders could choose cooperation over conflict. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, weighing implications that extended far beyond his authority. I'll report what I've seen here. The decision of how to proceed will be made by men with more rank than mine. As the cavalry patrol prepared to leave, Morrison approached Sam privately. Whatever happens officially, you've accomplished something remarkable here. Don't let politics destroy what you've built. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, Sam and Ayana sat by their fire, joined by several Apache visitors who had become regular guests. The conversation flowed between English and Apache, with Ayana translating when needed. My grandfather Cochise dreamed of a day when Apache children could grow up without learning to hate, Ayana said, looking up at the stars beginning to appear. Perhaps that day is closer than we thought. An elderly Chiricahua warrior nodded approvingly. Young Mackenzie shows what is possible when fear is replaced by respect. His water feeds all who thirst. His medicine heals all who hurt. Sam felt the weight of what they had accomplished, but also the fragility of their achievement. It's just a beginning, he said, but sometimes that's all it takes. One person willing to give water to someone dying of thirst. In the months that followed, word of the Mackenzie Ranch experiment spread throughout the territory. Some settlers denounced it as collaboration with savages. Some Apache leaders dismissed it as white man's trickery, but others, on both sides, began to wonder if perhaps there was another way forward. Young warriors started arriving at the ranch, seeking to learn from Ayana's example. Curious settlers rode out from distant towns to see for themselves if peace was truly possible. Each visitor carried the story further, planting seeds of possibility in minds that had known only conflict. The test had become something greater than anyone had imagined. What began as one man's simple act of giving water to a wounded enemy had grown into proof that even the deepest divisions could be bridged by genuine compassion and mutual respect. As the first anniversary of their agreement approached, Sam knew that regardless of what officials in distant capitals decided, they had already achieved something that would outlast any government policy. They had proven that the seeds of peace were always present, waiting only for someone brave enough to plant them and patient enough to tend their growth. In the harsh but beautiful landscape of the American Southwest, where survival had always depended on finding water in an unforgiving land, two peoples had discovered that the most precious resource they could share was hope itself.